now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. 5 billion naira. That's how much each state and the FCT will get to address the impact of petrol subsidy removal and rising food prices. The funds are to be distributed through a formula with 52% as grants and 48% to be repaid to the Central Bank of Nigeria in installments. Additionally, the federal government has released 5 trucks of rice to each state governors. These decisions were taken by the National Economic Council. State House correspondent Adesua Omoran reports.
It is no longer news that it is not the best of times for Africa's largest economy as it struggles to address the economic challenges stemming from the removal of petrol subsidies. Concerns have arisen over escalating costs of essential commodities and the need for macroeconomic stability in Nigeria. At this month's meeting, those concerns on rising costs of food and transportation dominate deliberations by the highest economic advisory body, chaired by the Vice President. Governor of Borno State, flanked by some of his other colleagues, reveals some of the decisions reached to alleviate immediate hardships on the people.
The federal government has approved the sum of 5 billion naira to be given to each state for the procurement of 100,000 bags of rice, 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize, and fertilizers. This funding has to be shared with a formula as follows. 52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months to the CBN by the states and the local government areas in Nigeria.
The issue of the social register, I would say that is ongoing in terms of review. End game is to reduce unemployment, get unemployed resources. Unemployed resources are not just idle hands, but also they raise the capacity utilization of industries, including the moribund ones, to be restructured.
In light of recent labor union protests, the council establishes a committee to engage with labor groups while urging calm among citizens. The council also acknowledges the repercussions of the volatile situation in Niger Republic, particularly for states along the border.
NEMA will also liaise with states to distribute foodstuffs to the people immediately, especially those that are affecting the frontline states that are bordering the Niger Republic because of influx of refugees. The council has also tasked the state to dialogue with the labor unions leadership.
The meeting also reviewed a presentation on assessing the nationwide impact of the 2022 floods. The committee's efforts faced setbacks in addressing the effects on people and infrastructure.
Only 16 out of the total number of affected states forwarded their submission to NEC Secretariat to date, as expected. About 15 others were yet to do so. The submission from defaulting states are being awaited as we speak.
Recognizing the interim nature of these measures, the Economic Council reaffirms its dedication to pursuing enduring solutions. Emphasis is placed on long-term strategies, especially in commercial and irrigated agriculture. The Council also highlights the $800 million loans intention to assist Nigerians through accurate registration. Additionally, it welcomes the 500 billion naira package distribution announced by the President aimed at alleviating subsidy removal effects. Adesua Omoran, Arise News.
Well, thanks, Adesua. Okay, good to see you on set today. We're missing Dr. Bati. It's good to have you here.
Yes.
We have our palliatives, 5 billion naira to each state. Your take on this story?
Yeah, it's too little, almost too late. And it's as simple as this. Cost of food is rising. Cost of production of food is rising. Just a couple of days ago, farmers in Ogun State decided they were going to demonstrate in Yewa axis of the state, and they went out to demonstrate to say that we are struggling. This is not a case of let the poor breathe anymore. Even the middle class needs to breathe. They are struggling. Everyone is struggling. Even the upper middle class, they're struggling as well. We have a situation where farms are shutting down. I have relationship with farmers because I'm close to them and I have family members who are farmers. Poultry farmers are struggling to the point where they're shutting down. They can't afford the cost of the feed that they need for their the poultry that they have, and other people are struggling as well. So we're in a situation where 5 million or 5 billion naira as of today is a little too little, and it's coming a bit late in the day. This is what the likes of Rufai and Ruben and yourself have been saying on this show forever and a day, that this is a decision that should have taken days ago. It should have been taken weeks ago, actually. The decision to remove subsidy is an excellent one, but it's not one that you can do without putting in the arrangements and the palliatives. So we're in a very, very tight corner. I don't know how the governors are going to distribute 5 billion in any state of the federation. It will be good for them to be as transparent as possible so that the media can see what has been done with the money, but I am not sure where that will go. I don't know what your thoughts are.
All right. Fine.
I mean, largely, I share that sentiment. And it has to be said, we know the problems with Nigeria. We know the antecedents of our governors. Many times in the past, when they've been given a chance to be able to distribute necessary aid for the people, they became worse than the problems themselves. You remember the case of COVID-19 and the COVID warehouses? People had to go to those warehouses, bombard those warehouses to be able to get things to eat. You remember how shambolic the distribution was during COVID? And now you're giving those same governors a bag of rice, thinking they'll distribute. Hell no, they're not going to do it well. They are not going to do it well at all. Even the times we have given the governors money, I remember the bailout fund, so that a lot of them could pay salaries. How did they do it? They were shambolic in that too. So we're not expecting anything. I think the only thing that'll cut the chase for us is if we put in a specific layer of accountability as regards how the distribution is done. And that's why there should also be overseeing of this by the humanitarian ministry. Better I do, this is your first real test. The government should allow humanitarian ministry oversee this and see how the distribution channel will actually go. Also, various emergency bodies that will handle the distribution, NEMA, we should be able to allow them oversee this and this will go. And they should forensically audit the distribution process. When I saw those bags of rice, all I'm seeing in my head is hope it's not going to go to party members and party surrogates. And this 5 billion, we should watch it closely. At least it's a good step to be able to bring forward a palliative. It's late, yes, we admit, but it's a good step. And we commend them for the same, because if they had not done anything, we'll also come here and say, oh, they had not done anything. At least we commend them for doing what they have done this time around. But the question is how far-reaching? The other part of the palliative the president announced in his speech should be done. Most importantly, the cultivation. We can't keep saying distribution of food. It will get to a stage we need to cultivate and be able to make our own food. You can't keep giving a man food. You have to teach him how to fish. But most importantly, it will be bringing about production in the Nigerian economy. Today, we are not getting a lot of resources because the Nigerian economy is not producing. Most of the things we do on the agricultural value chain, we still import largely. We still import chicken, and we have poultry here because we can't meet the demands. How about we build that capacity to be able to meet the demands? We import things like gari, despite the fact that we churn a lot of cassava. We import rice, albeit through the borders. It's not on the books anyway. Again, that's why they say, oh, we have rice sustainability. But we still import. We import maize. We import everything. Can we build capacity where we can feed local production entirely and also be able to export? That's the biggest challenge for us. And the government said it was going to give subvention to be able to plant across hectares. Have the state governors earmarked those 150 hectares of land to be able to make those planting operations done? These are multiple questions. But the truth is, it's good what they have done. Better late than never, I'll suggest. Late anyway, but better late than never. But the implementation is the most important thing.
Absolutely. But let me differ with you slightly in terms of better late than never. yes, it's good that they have released 5 billion naira, but I would say that it is almost tantamount to a drop in the ocean, and so the effect would not be felt, or if hardly felt. Since the removal of fuel subsidy and the suffering on the masses has often been likened to the birth pangs of childbirth. When you're in childbirth, you don't give paracetamol to a woman in childbirth. You would give a strong anesthesia like a spinal block or an epidural block, just so that it can match the level of pain. Yes, I know that there are staggered announcements in terms of the plans of the federal government to the response in response to the people. However, the first thing was that after over 75 days of this announcement, then you come up with trickles. What this presents to the state governors, unfortunately, is actually more of a challenge than a relief. Because how do you distribute 100,000 bags of rice to a state, in a state like Lagos State, where there are about 20 million people? Where do you begin? Which local government will you serve first? How would you allocate? What would be the sharing formula? It would leave more people feeling disadvantaged. And then when there's a rush for scarce resources, you turn people into, people start scrambling, and then there are fights and there are things. I believe that this, despite the fact that, okay, it's one response from the federal government, is so insignificant that it might actually cause more problems than bring about a solution. We've waited. The federal government have asked Nigerians to be patient. They are working. They are thinking. And then we come out with an announcement like that. At best, I believe it's quite disappointing. There are a few other things that has been mentioned in terms of what can be done. We need to critically think. Then this $800 million, what is the delay? I understand that there are consultations as to the best way to distribute this. Should it go more into infrastructure? Should it be conditional cash transfer, which the governors are insisting on? But we have to find an announcement. People are suffering. You cannot give 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize and fertilizers for a population of about 200 million people, or at least in different states. It is abysmal at best. And then moving on to implementation. When you look at private organizations, they have what we call implementing partners. Who will be the implementing partners of these governors? Are they going to channel these resources through their local government chairman, or how will this work? The principle, as has been mentioned, is in the implementation. A little, I don't know how the governors are going to go about distributing this, and this is what also pushes for them just leaving it in a storehouse, because when they think of the enormity of trying to allocate scarce resources, there's almost no point to going about doing it. And so this is pushing it back again to the federal government. A little too late, and almost nothing, because when you give a woman in labor Panadol or paracetamol, it is almost a slap on her face. It is ridiculous. It doesn't go anywhere. Move on to our next story. Military chiefs from the West African bloc have said constitutional order will be restored in Niger by all means available. They're in Ghana discussing military intervention in Niger following last month's coup. Niger's junta has ignored calls to reinstate deposed and detained President Mohamed Bazoum, saying the plan to charge him with treason. The ECOWAS commissioner says the group is still giving diplomacy a chance, but all options are on the table. Neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso, which hunters also rule, have said any military intervention in Niger would be a declaration of war.
They are pretending, that, now they are ready for talks. But even as they are telling us that they are ready for talks, they are still seeking reasons to justify an unjustifiable coup d'etat. Let no one be in doubt that if everything else fails, the valiant forces of West Africa, both the military and the civilian components, are ready to answer to the call of duty. By all means available, constitutional order will be restored in the country. And this meeting today bears testimony to that. What they forget is that ECOWAS is a rules-based organization. We have our protocols, we have our norms, and we are ready to protect them. That's why the heads of state are saying, if push comes to shove, we are going into Niger with our own contingent-owned equipment.
All right. Okay, we've been following this story. Yesterday, 2 days, we'd mentioned earlier that the ECOWAS chiefs of defense would be meeting in Ghana Thursday and Friday. Yesterday, the update is there. Your take on this story?
Well, it's good that there's conversation, and it is ongoing, but it is extremely important that the conversation must continue. Going to war is not an option. It's never been an option, but those who put it on the table, I think definitely from my perspective, personal opinion, is that they got this wrong. They got it wrong by even putting it on the table as a starting point. The starting point has got to be, let's have conversation, let's find solution. The guest you had on the show yesterday also said it. We can't be fighting proxy war in Africa. We have to be looking at how do we consolidate, how do we grow this continent, how do we work together. The priority of ECOWAS is to make sure that there is connecting flight between Ghana and Abuja and Ghana and Niamey, and you don't have to go to Paris before you can come back to Niamey from Ghana, from Lagos to Niamey direct. They should get airpeace to be able to fly all routes and have access. They should open trade across the continent, especially across ECOWAS. They should make sure that there is visa. You don't even need visa to travel across ECOWAS. That should be the priority, not a case of... and I think one person that said something absolutely wonderful, and I'm really happy that he mentioned it, and he didn't attend the meeting of ECOWAS himself, that's George Ware, when he said very clearly that the priority should be those who decide that they must stay in government for 7 years and then change it to 10 years and change it to 14 and decide they want to stay in government forever. Those are the people that ECOWAS should be looking at, giving sanction against them and saying we will go to war against you because you're not doing well for your government, for your country. So those are the people that we should focus on. In terms of the military, it's not a good idea, but it has happened, like it has happened in Mali, like it has happened in Burkina Faso and other places. But we have to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the only way I think it won't happen again is to make sure the only way it won't happen again is to make sure that those who sit tight are not allowed to sit tight. They become so uncomfortable they will move. And those who are in government, they're encouraged and pretty much enforced to do right for their country. And that's my thought.
So I'll take you back to the 60s in Nigeria to be able to tell you how dangerous coups are. In the 60s, there was a lot of political squabble in the West, which was called the Wild Wild West then. The power play between Awolowo and Akintola, and many dramatic personnel. But all of this crystallized after the elections in '64. And this went on for a while. And a bunch of very idealist young Nigerian soldiers says, oh, we'll save our country. And the best way they thought, just like the Nigerian coup plotters did, was to take a coup and take the country. When they perpetrated that coup, they got the support of people too. A lot of people were happy. Oh, we are done with these crazy politicians, they said then. But little did they know that was the beginning of the downfall of our country. Kaduna and Zego at the north perpetrated his actions, Ifejuna, and the likes of this man. In fact, they've constantly over the years argued why they struck. In fact, they wrote a book about it. But the truth is, did it solve the problem? Never. It cascaded into a full-blown war. And that's why when Dr. Arikana was saying yesterday that it's the beginning of a revolution, I don't think so. It is just the beginning of another bout of selfish interest by young African soldiers or African soldiers here. Because the reason why the coup happened in Niger in the first place, there are still insurgent attacks in Niger. Some Nigerian soldiers were killed recently, over 17 of them. The question is, so has that solved the problem they accuse Bazoum of not solving? Never. The way forward will be to dialogue. Yes, we don't want war. But also for you to be able to see the selfishness of these Nigerian coup plotters. They've started sending some of their family members to Dubai and Burkina Faso because things are getting out and they fear an invasion. So in the end, you Nigerian people, if you're by any chance watching us this morning, You can see the same so-called leaders you are supporting does not like you, do not love you. And like I said, very soon the people will have to turn against them, because that's always the case in the end. These Yorubas have a saying, the solution to an headache is not cutting the head off. While talks will continue, ECOWAS too should keep talking tough to these people. And very soon, I think the coup plotters will budge. And now they've started to talk. The other day, the Prime Minister of Niger was in Chad to go seek support. Talk to the Chadian authorities. And now they will talk. Probably when they have a conversation with ECOWAS, they'll be able to draw out a timeline. But the way forward is, let us have dialogue. Let us strengthen our democratic process, like you said, okay? And let us make it difficult for bad leaders to be able to extend their time in power. But please, let us do what is right for this our continent. And let us make it work. Coups will never be the answer.
All right. As Dr. Kwao was with us yesterday on the show, and she had talked about the fact that she'd rather refer to this as a revolution or a revolt against neo-colonialists as opposed to a coup. However, a coup is a coup. And despite the rationale or the argument for this takeover, military takeover in Niger, the fact still remains that it was an undemocratic process to resolving an issue. And so no matter how noble or good the intentions were, or a revolution in this instance, the fact that it had to take an undemocratic process to get in it means that the process already from the beginning is flawed. And as already has been established, if you look at the antecedents, when you have coup situations, it usually doesn't end well. In fact, the hunters usually end up doing exactly what they accuse the democratic government of doing in terms of corruption, in terms of lengthy time in office, in terms of abuse of power, in terms of trading with the West. And so nations like that end up going back to square one, or perhaps even a worse state from how they started. And that is why ECOWAS has taken a stance against the coup in Niger, because, as has been said, democracy in this particular region must be protected at all costs. Now, the Chiefs of Defense Staff meeting in Ghana yesterday, day one, had established the fact that they were ready. If in the event that all diplomatic efforts fail, they had the military power and will to go in for military intervention. However, the conversation has been again and again that we don't want a war. There have been analysis as to the cost, the impact of wars, and how disadvantageous it is to countries, not just the country in question, but to neighboring countries as well. And don't forget, Nigeria shares border, especially the northern part of Nigeria, shares border with Niger. And so there's already that conversation ongoing. Therefore, the conversation around diplomacy, dialogue must be pushed. Sanctions, even though the junta in Niger have said, they should lift the sanctions, it is affecting the poorest of the poor in their country. In fact, their citizens in Niger. It's established as well that at the end of the day, the elites find a way of looking after themselves, of taking care of themselves, of taking care of their family members. And so who ends up suffering? So this is time perhaps to begin to speak to Nigerians themselves to wake up. Yes, they're rejoicing at the fact that we're doing away with, bad leadership, the tie with France. It's enough. France should take off their hands off their natural resources, off their resources. It must be done properly. And so perhaps it's time for them to have internal dialogue with the junta, because they cannot keep egging them on if at the end of the day, when it hits the hardest, it would hit the Nigerian citizens and not usually in terms of the leaders. Sometimes they're taken out, but most times before that happens, the suffering, the poverty levels, hunger, lack of access to medicine. So speak up. It's not, we cannot rejoice at an unconstitutional method of taking over power, no matter what the justification for it is. So second day would happen today with the Chiefs of Defense in Ghana. They would definitely deliberate and give updates as to what their stance is. But as it stands, they're saying we are ready if there's an event, and definitely the Nigerian army is no match for the ECOWAS military groups.